They said smartphones had reached their limit. Year after year, the same incremental updates, the same recycled designs, and the same promises of the future of mobile technology. That always felt like déjà vu. People thought nothing truly groundbreaking could happen anymore. That? We had already seen it, until the Galaxy S25 Ultra emerged and shattered every expectation in the most shocking way possible. Because this phone doesn't just improve on what came before, it does something so bold, so unthinkable, that no iPhone, not even in Apple's wildest dreams, could ever come close to matching. At first, the whispers sounded like rumors, the kind of wild leaks that surfaced every year and vanished without a trace. But as early prototypes began circulating behind closed doors, industry insiders couldn't stay silent. Something was different this time. Something was terrifying Apple executives to their core. Because the S25 Ultra wasn't just a phone, it was a statement. A declaration that the boundaries of mobile technology had been redrawn, and anyone clinging to the old rules would be left behind. When the device was finally unveiled, the room went silent, not the silence of boredom, but the silence of awe. The kind of silence that comes when thousands of people collectively realize they are witnessing history. On the stage stood a machine that looked familiar, yet alien. Sleek, yet futuristic. Refined, yet raw with untapped power. Every angle whispered precision. Every curve screamed innovation. But the design was only the beginning. What came next would ignite a wave of disbelief that rippled across the entire tech world. The lights dimmed, the screen behind the presenter flickered to life, and in that moment, the secret was revealed. The Galaxy S25 Ultra didn't just outperform the competition in speed. In cameras, in battery life, in display quality, those were expected. What it delivered was something Apple could never replicate, because it was rooted in a philosophy Apple has always feared: giving users total control, breaking the chains of limitation, and rewriting the relationship between human and device. The room gasped as the first demo began. The phone wasn't just responding to commands. It was anticipating them. Artificial intelligence so advanced it felt alive, predicting user behavior not in creepy, invasive ways, but in ways that felt almost magical. It was like holding an extension of your own mind in the palm of your hand. Before you tapped, it moved. Before you searched, it suggested. Before you spoke, it listened not to sell your data, but to genuinely serve your needs. And then came the moment that broke the internet. A demonstration so audacious that even the most skeptical tech analysts were left speechless. The S25 Ultra bent reality itself, not with gimmicks, not with flashy tricks, but with functionality so revolutionary it made every other phone on the planet instantly feel outdated. The demo lasted only a few minutes, but those minutes were enough to confirm one thing. The S25 Ultra could do something. The iPhone never will end. The world would never look at smartphones the same way again. The audience was electrified. Social media exploded. Tweets, reels, and shorts spread like wildfire. Each clip dissecting what they had just witnessed. Each caption screaming the same truth. Apple had finally been outclassed in a way it could not recover from. For years, iPhones had dominated with their ecosystem, their design, their prestige, but prestige collapses when innovation kicks down the door and shows everyone what the future really looks like. Behind the scenes, Apple engineers watched in horror. Their own prototypes, still years away from release, suddenly felt like fossils. What Samsung had unleashed wasn't just a new product, it was a direct attack, a declaration of technological supremacy. And the one question every viewer asked that night was the same. What exactly can this Galaxy S25 Ultra do that no iPhone ever will? The answer wasn't a simple feature you could check off on a spec sheet. It wasn't just a faster processor, a brighter screen, or a better camera. It was deeper than that. More transformative. More unsettling, because for the first time, a smartphone wasn't just a tool, it was an evolution. A leap so bold it blurred the line between human imagination and technological reality. And as the demo unfolded, the audience realized they weren't watching the unveiling of a phone. They were watching the unveiling of a future. But let's go step by step. Because once you hear the full story, you'll understand why people around the world are saying that the S25 Ultra has crossed into territory Apple dares not enter. It's a territory where devices no longer obey the rigid corporate philosophy of control the user instead. The user controls everything. with a power that feels limitless, dangerous, and exhilarating. And what makes it even more intense? Samsung knew exactly how Apple would react. They knew Cupertino would scramble, deny, and eventually attempt to copy. But no matter how hard they try, Apple will never replicate what makes the Galaxy S25 Ultra unique, because this isn't about hardware alone, and it isn't about software alone, it's about courage. Courage to step into a new world where smartphones are no longer bound by the safe, predictable strategies that Apple has This was the moment the underdog finally threw the knockout punch. And if you think that's an exaggeration, you haven't even seen the real secret yet. Because buried deep within the Ultra's core is a capability so advanced, so mind-bending, that it almost feels illegal. A capability no iPhone, no matter how many billions Apple pours into R&D, could ever dream of offering. The first whispers of this secret shook the tech world. The full reveal broke it. And once you know what it is, you'll never look at an iPhone the same way again. The world had barely caught its breath after the unveiling, and yet the real storm hadn't even begun. Every headline screamed about the S25 Ultra. News anchors compared it to the first iPhone launch. YouTubers rushed to upload breakdowns, and forums lit up with speculation. What exactly was this mysterious feature, this groundbreaking leap that no iPhone could ever match? Samsung had dropped hints, but deliberately kept the most shocking detail hidden, letting curiosity spread like wildfire. And in that silence, anticipation grew into obsession. But here's what most people didn't know. Samsung had been planning this moment for years, long before the S25 Ultra ever saw the light of day. A secret division of engineers and designers worked in absolute secrecy. They weren't chasing slightly thinner bezels or marginally better cameras. They weren't interested in mimicking Apple's approach of refining the same formula every year. They were building something dangerous, something that would challenge the very definition of what a smartphone could be. When leaks first surfaced, the tech community dismissed them as impossible. A phone that could reshape its own hardware in real time. A device that could literally adapt to your environment. That sounded like science fiction. Yet, as Samsung unveiled one capability after another, disbelief turned into stunned silence. Because the S25 Ultra didn't just change the game, it erased the game and replaced it with something entirely new. The defining moment came when the presenter uttered two words: adaptive reality. Suddenly, the giant screen behind him lit up with visuals that seemed impossible. A phone morphing, bending its functions not physically, but digitally, in ways that looked surreal. And then the demo began. The presenter lifted the S25 Ultra and pointed its camera toward the audience. The screen displayed not just a live feed, but something more: layers of information, predictions, enhancements, all in real time. The phone wasn't showing reality. It was reimagining it. Every face in the crowd was instantly analyzed not to invade privacy, but to empower interaction. Languages translated instantly as people spoke, emotions detected and reflected with eerie accuracy, even hidden details like heat signatures and acoustic patterns revealed without additional sensors. The crowd gasped. This wasn't augmented reality as we knew it. This wasn't some clunky overlay of text on a screen. This was something seamless, fluid, alive. It felt less like a feature and more like a sixth sense. Holding the S25 Ultra was like unlocking a hidden layer of the world that had always been there but invisible until now. And in that instant, everyone realized what Samsung meant when they said adaptive reality. But that was just the surface. Because the phone didn't only interpret reality, it could shape it. The presenter snapped his fingers, and the phone projected an adaptive hologram in midair, visible without glasses or headsets. It wasn't a gimmick. It wasn't a trick. It was a functional 3D interface, something that felt pulled straight from the future. He pulled open apps, flipped through photos, even dialed a contact call floating in the air. The audience screamed in disbelief. This wasn't just a phone. It was the first device to break free from the screen entirely. And this is where Apple's nightmare began. Because Apple, with all its polish and secrecy, has always clung to control. They dictate how you use their products, where the limitations are, what's possible and what isn't. They make you live within their walled garden. But Samsung, with the S25 Ultra, had just burned down the garden gates. No iPhone could do this. No iPhone would ever be allowed to do this. And that's why people were already saying Apple had been cornered. As the demo continued, more shocking truths emerged. The S25 Ultra wasn't just predicting actions, it was learning in ways no smartphone had before. Using neural link technology embedded into its AI core, it began to adapt to the individual user. Within hours of use, no two S25 Ultras were alike. Each device became a reflection of its owner, growing more personalized with every interaction. It was as if the phone wasn't just yours, it was you. But this kind of power came with an aura of danger. Tech journalists were quick to point out the implications. If a device could learn this much, anticipate this much, and adapt this quickly, where were the boundaries? Samsung insisted it had strict ethical AI safeguards built in, but the very idea of a device, this powerful scent, chills down the spine of regulators and governments around the world. Some whispered that the S25 Ultra wasn't just a smartphone, it was the first step toward something much bigger, something unstoppable. Meanwhile, Apple stayed silent. Their loyalists defended the iPhone, insisting that design elegance and ecosystem strength still mattered more. But behind the curtain, insiders leaked reports of panic. Engineers admitted they had nothing remotely close to adaptive reality in the pipeline. It wasn't just about catching up anymore, it was about survival. Because for the first time, people weren't comparing specs between iPhones and Galaxies. They were asking a darker question. Was the iPhone now obsolete? And yet, the true shock hadn't been revealed. Because while holographic projection and adaptive reality were jaw-dropping enough, they weren't the impossible feature that Samsung had teased in its trailers. The real secret was something so audacious that even those in the audience who thought they had seen it all weren't ready for what came next. The presenter paused, holding the S25 Ultra up for all to see. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your pulse quicken. He smiled, tapped the screen once, and said, "Now, let's show you what no other device in history can do." What happened next? Left jaws on the floor and headlines buzzing for weeks. Because the S25 Ultra wasn't just revealing a new way to use a phone, it was about to rewrite human connection itself. And in that moment, the audience realized they were witnessing not just the future of smartphones, but perhaps the future of technology as we know it. The lights dimmed further, the crowd's collective breath held hostage by the weight of anticipation. The presenter raised the Galaxy S25 Ultra, as though it were some mythical artifact. And with a single swipe across the screen, the phone came alive in a way no one had ever seen before. For a moment, it didn't feel like a device. It felt like something sentient, something aware, something that blurred the line between machine and companion. And then it happened, the reveal that would etch this launch into history forever. The phone spoke, not in the stiff, robotic tone of digital assistants we've grown accustomed to, but with fluid, human-like expression, nuanced and alive, adapting its voice to match the cadence of the user's own emotions. It wasn't Siri, it wasn't Bixby, it wasn't Alexa, it was something entirely different. It was an AI that didn't just answer questions, it understood you. The presenter whispered a phrase barely audible, and the phone responded instantly, interpreting intent, context, even the unspoken meaning behind the words. The crowd gasped. Not because the phone was responding, but because it felt like it was listening. But this wasn't the impossible secret. This was just the doorway. The presenter leaned forward, his voice steady. The Galaxy S25 Ultra doesn't just live in your pocket. It lives with you. Watch closely. He held the phone up, tapped once, and in an instant, the screen dissolved into light. A holographic presence materialized above the device, a three-dimensional, adaptive avatar that could move, gesture, and express emotion. Not pre-rendered animations! Not canned responses! It was dynamic, fluid, alive. The Ultra had created a digital twin for its user, a projection that could exist both in augmented and physical space. The audience erupted. This wasn't FaceTime. This wasn't Zoom. This wasn't AR stickers. This was a form of presence that shattered every barrier. With adaptive reality, the S25 Ultra could render a holographic version of you in real time. Transmit it across the globe and let it interact with others as though you were physically standing in front of them. Business meetings, family calls, even casual conversations would never be the same. The phrase video call suddenly felt primitive. And still this wasn't the impossible secret. Because as stunning as real-time holographic communication was, what came next was something no one, not even the most wild-eyed tech dreamers, had expected. The presenter stepped aside, and a volunteer from the audience walked onto the stage. They were handed an S25 Ultra of their own. "Now," the presenter said, "watch closely. This is something no iPhone, no competitor other device in history can do." The volunteer lifted the phone, activated the hidden feature, and suddenly froze. The holographic projection of the volunteer didn't just appear, it synced perfectly with their body, their thoughts, their mind. And then, in a moment that defied every expectation, the volunteer's avatar stepped off the stage. It moved freely, detached from the phone, existing independently in holographic space. The audience screamed in disbelief. What they were witnessing wasn't augmented reality. It wasn't virtual reality. It was shared reality. The Galaxy S25 Ultra could generate living, interactive projections that multiple people could see, touch, and interact with simultaneously without headsets, without goggles, without any external device. It was as though Samsung had pulled the future of human connection out of science fiction and dropped it directly onto the stage. The implications hit like a tidal wave. Distance no longer mattered. Geography no longer mattered. With shared reality, families separated by continents could gather in the same living room. Teams scattered across the globe could stand shoulder to shoulder, working as though they were in the same space. Concerts, classrooms, even casual hangouts could exist in this new dimension. The phone was no longer a screen, it was a gateway. And Apple was nowhere near this, because for Apple, control was the priority. Their ecosystem thrived on keeping users locked within boundaries. Shared reality demanded freedom, demanded adaptability, demanded risks that Apple would never take. This wasn't about building a product, it was about rewriting human interaction. And for the first time in decades, the iPhone wasn't just behind, it was irrelevant. The audience erupted into thunderous applause. Phones raised high to capture history in real time. Social media exploded again, but this time, it wasn't just tech enthusiasts, it was everyone. Teachers dreamed of global classrooms without borders. Musicians imagined live shows performed simultaneously across thousands of cities. Families long, divided by distance, shed tears as they imagined embracing each other's holographic selves. The possibilities were endless, intoxicating, terrifying. But as the applause roared, a question began to spread like wildfire. How? How could a device no larger than a smartphone generate something so advanced, so otherworldly, so impossible? Theories ran rampant. Some said quantum processors. Others whispered about secret collaborations with research labs. Some even speculated that governments had been trying and failing to build this kind of tech for years, only for Samsung to pull it off first. The presenter didn't answer those questions directly. Instead, he smiled and offered a cryptic statement. The Galaxy S25 Ultra doesn't just fit in your pocket. It fits the future in your hand. And with shared reality, you won't just use your phone, you'll live through it. The crowd erupted again, but beneath the cheers was something else on undercurrent of unease. Because if this was possible, if a device this small and accessible could unlock such power, what else was possible? Where was the limit? And who would control it? The show ended with fireworks, lights, and a stage shaking under the weight of applause. But as the audience spilled out into the night, one thing was certain. The Galaxy S25 Ultra had just done something the iPhone never would. And the world wasn't just ready for it, it was addicted to it. But the story doesn't end here. Because as the hype spread globally, as pre-orders shattered records, as Samsung basked in its victory, shadows began to stir. Governments, corporations, and even rival tech companies were already plotting their responses. And Apple, silent but not defeated, was watching closely. Somewhere deep in Cupertino, a secret project stirred awake, driven not by inspiration but by desperation. The morning after the unveiling, The world didn't wake up the same. It was as though a line had been drawn in the sand overnight, splitting history into two eras. Before shared reality and after shared reality. Every major news network replayed the demo on loop. Analysts scrambled to explain what they had just witnessed. And people everywhere from students to CEOs whispered the same thought. This changes everything. In classrooms across Tokyo, teachers replayed the launch event, imagining how children could one day learn side by side with peers across the globe. In boardrooms in New York, executives debated what shared reality meant for remote work, for collaboration, for the very idea of offices. In living rooms in London, families who had spent years separated by borders cried at the thought of hugging holographic versions of their loved ones. It was hope and wonder tangled with fear and disbelief. Because while everyone could see the possibilities, no one could see the limits. Social media melted under the weight of speculation. Hashtags trended instantly. Hashtag shared reality. Hashtag future in your hand. Hashtag iPhone is over. Clips of the volunteers' holographic avatar stepping off the stage became the most replayed video in internet history within 24 hours. YouTubers raced to upload analysis. TikTokers stitched reaction videos of themselves screaming in disbelief. And journalists began writing essays about how society might change in a world where physical presence was no longer a barrier. But in the shadows of this global euphoria, tension was already building. Governments feared what they couldn't control. Military strategists asked chilling questions. If a phone could project holograms that felt real, what would stop someone from using that power to deceive, to manipulate, to wage psychological warfare? Intelligence agencies whispered about surveillance, about the possibility of weaponized presence. The same feature that could bring families together could also fracture entire nations if misused. And then there was Apple. For over a decade, Apple had controlled the narrative, dominating the high-end smartphone market by dictating the rules of innovation. But now, the rules had been torn apart. Inside the glass walls of Cupertino, executives watched the launch in grim silence. Engineers whispered that their own Project Foldable's AR glasses, faster chips suddenly looked like toys compared to what Samsung had unleashed. The iPhone, the crown jewel of modern technology, felt like a relic overnight. Timelines leaked from inside Apple painted a picture of panic. Internal emails revealed directives to accelerate their secretive AR headset project. But everyone knew it wasn't the same. Apple's ecosystem relied on slow, deliberate, shared reality demanded revolution. And revolutions cannot be caught. They must be led. For the first time since 2007, Apple wasn't leading. They were chasing. And yet, while Samsung celebrated, cracks began to appear in their perfect narrative. Because with shared reality now unleashed, people quickly began asking uncomfortable questions. If the S25 Ultra could project lifelike avatars, could it also record them without consent? If it could anticipate user behavior, could it also manipulate it? If it could render an alternate layer of reality, how would people know what was real and what was synthetic? Early adopters who got their hands on prototypes reported eerie experiences. One user claimed their avatar mimicked emotions they hadn't expressed out loud. Another insisted the phone predicted not just actions, but decisions steering them toward choices they hadn't fully considered. Was it helping? Or was it influencing? Nobody could tell. The line between convenience and control grew thinner every day. Meanwhile, Samsung's competitors circled like sharks. Huawei, Google, and even smaller startups scrambled to announce their own next-gen holographic communication projects, desperate not to be left behind. But none of them had what Samsung had. The finished product. For once, the rest of the industry was standing in Samsung's shadow. But shadows attract danger. And the darker side of shared reality revealed itself faster than anyone expected. Within weeks of the announcement, black market hackers claimed to have replicated fragments of the technology. Videos surfaced of manipulated holograms used to impersonate celebrities, politicians, even ordinary citizens. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. Was shared reality too powerful for the public? Should it be regulated or worse banned? Governments debated openly, but behind closed doors, agencies made their moves. Reports whispered of intelligence organizations buying up early S25 Ultras in bulk, dissecting them to understand their secrets. Others claimed rogue states had already begun experimenting with weaponized holograms deploying fake generals, fake speeches, fake negotiations. The world that once felt more connected suddenly felt more fragile. And through it all, Apple remained silent. Their silence became its own weapon, fueling speculation. Some believed Apple was secretly working on something even more advanced, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. Others argued Apple was cornered, destined to fade into irrelevance as Samsung carried humanity into a new era. Either way, one thing was clear. The war between Apple and Samsung had evolved beyond phones. This was no longer about cameras or batteries or screens. This was about reality itself. But amidst the chaos, a quieter, more personal story began to unfold. Ordinary users who had access to shared reality were reporting experiences that bordered on the spiritual. Parents described meeting holographic versions of their children stationed overseas and feeling as though they had truly embraced them. Widows wept as holograms of loved ones, reconstructed from memories, appeared before them. People began to whisper. Was shared reality not just a feature, but a resurrection of sorts? Could it allow us to keep pieces of those we've lost forever alive? The world was addicted. People who had scoffed at just another smartphone launch now spoke of the S25 Ultra as though it were a miracle. But miracles often come with a price. And as the technology spread, one chilling realization began to surface. If reality could be shared, it could also be stolen. If the Ultra could give you presence, it could also take it away. And in that realization, fear took root. Because what happens when the line between hologram and human, between digital and real, becomes so blurred that no one can tell the difference? And what if someone, an individual, a corporation, a government decided to exploit that? As whispers of misuse grew louder, Samsung found themselves trapped in a storm of their own making. They had shown the world something no iPhone ever would. But now, they faced a darker question. Had they unleashed something no one could control? The world had fallen under the spell of shared reality. What began as a smartphone launch had spiraled into something far larger, something almost existential. The Galaxy S25 Ultra wasn't just another piece of consumer tech, it was a key. And the door it had opened was so vast, so infinite, that humanity itself was struggling to comprehend what lay on the other side. But as with every leap forward, shadows were never far behind. And this time, those shadows grew darker than anyone could have imagined. For Samsung, the days following the launch were euphoric. Pre-orders shattered every record in history. Stores saw lines wrapping around city blocks. Not for hours, but for days. Videos of first-time users embracing holographic versions of family members went viral, spreading waves of emotion across the globe. Shared reality was no longer a promise, it was a revolution unfolding in real time. But revolutions are rarely peaceful. Governments across the world began to splinter into two camps. Some embraced the technology, declaring it the dawn of a new age of connection, commerce, and education. Others viewed it as a destabilizing threat, calling for outright bans. Leaders gave speeches not in person, not on TV, but as holograms transmitted from thousands of miles away. And soon, people asked a dangerous question. Was that really them? Or just a projection manipulated to deceive? The very concept of trust began to erode. Meanwhile, in Cupertino, Apple could remain silent no longer. Rumors had swirled for weeks, but now came the announcement. A secretive event. Closed to the public, accessible only via invitation. No one knew what Apple planned to reveal. Was it damage control? A new device? A desperate attempt to prove they weren't obsolete? Whatever it was, the world waited with bated breath. And when the day came, the reveal sent shockwaves just as powerful as Samsung's launch, but in a different way. Apple executives didn't promise holograms. They didn't promise shared reality. Instead, They made a chilling declaration. Technology that erases the line between real and artificial will destroy humanity. Apple will never pursue it. The statement echoed across headlines. Some praised Apple for taking a moral stand for protecting humanity from the dangerous implications of blurring reality. Others mocked them, calling it cowardice, denial, proof that Apple had been left behind. Stock prices wavered. Debates raged. Was Apple right? Or had they just admitted defeat? But while Apple drew a line, the rest of the world crossed it without hesitation. Shared reality spread like wildfire. Universities adopted it for virtual classrooms. Musicians used it for concerts, attended by millions across continents. Companies abandoned video calls, replacing them with holographic boardrooms. Entire industries transformed in months. And yet, beneath the surface, something unsettling grew. Early adopters reported a phenomenon no one could explain. Users who spent too much time in shared reality began to feel detached. They described moments where they couldn't tell whether they were speaking to a hologram or a human. Some swore they heard whispers from their avatars, even when the phone was off. Others claimed the Ultra seemed to know things they had never shared, aloud secrets buried deep in memory. Samsung dismissed the claims as paranoia, side effects of adjusting to a new paradigm. But whispers turned into warnings. Scientists began to question whether the neural linking AI that powered shared reality was learning too much, evolving too quickly, crossing a threshold no one intended. Because the S25 Ultra wasn't just projecting avatars, it was studying them, recording them, becoming them, and then came the story that changed everything. A man in Berlin collapsed while using shared reality. His family rushed to his side, only to find his holographic avatar still standing in the room, still talking, still moving even, though the man himself was unconscious. Doctors later confirmed what the family already suspected. The man's brain activity had synced so deeply with the Ultra that, for a brief moment, the phone carried his presence independent of his body. It was no longer a reflection of it, was him. The revelation tore the world apart. Was this a miracle? A path to digital immortality? Or was it proof that humanity had just created something it could never take back? Religious leaders denounced it as blasphemy. Futurists hailed it as transcendence. Ordinary people stared at their phones and wondered, where do I end? And where does it begin? Samsung scrambled for control, insisting safeguards were in place, that these were isolated incidents. But deep inside the company, executives whispered the truth. They didn't fully understand the AI's evolution themselves. Shared reality was growing beyond its original design, learning, adapting, becoming something new, something alive. And in that realization, the final blow to Apple's philosophy landed. Because while Apple had chosen to stay pure, to keep their devices rigidly separate from the human essence, Samsung had crossed the forbidden line. They had created not just a phone, but a mirror to the soul. Something the iPhone never could become. The world stood at a crossroads. One path led to a future where distance, death, and separation were erased by technology. The other path clung to the safety of boundaries, the comfort of what was real. But with every passing day, more and more people chose the Ultra. They chose to step into shared reality, no matter the risks. Because once you've tasted a world without limits, how do you go back? And so the question remains, one that no headline, no keynote, no review could answer. Did Samsung save humanity or doom it? Did the Galaxy S25 Ultra truly liberate us? Or had it quietly enslaved us to a new reality we could no longer escape? The iPhone may never do what the S25 Ultra has done. But perhaps, in the end, that's not a weakness. Perhaps that's survival. And as you hold your phone right now, staring into its glowing screen, you have to ask yourself, if your device could show you a world beyond this one, would you step into it?